over here. So this clear code camp is a concept where we have been doing this for past 1.5 months, with this being the fifth session on the series. So there is a complete knowledge sharing session where we share the knowledge that we have acquired in the corporate. Being a corporate trainer into various corporate industries, I go through different standards in different organizations. So I just wanted to spread the knowledge what I've acquired, and this is purely for the branding of clear code consulting services. So this session is going to be on SOAPUI more in detail, what is web service, and a part of REST API would be called in, that is a part of REST assured Java library coding would be called in, equivalent to SOAPUI. So most of the people joined in today's session would not have much knowledge about web service testing and details about web services. So this session is going to be more in detail about SOAPUI, just to provide knowledge of web servers in depth and what all can be done with the SOAPUI tool in order to achieve web service automation. And we would be continuing it with REST assured API, REST assured library, which is a Java library, where we can actually do the same set of coding that we generally do on SOAPUI. So SOAPUI is a user interface for web services. So let me just start off with what is SOAPUI, what is web service, putting all together. So when you consider web services are nothing but hidden environments or the backends of your servers. So when you work with any activity, let's say you want to do a transaction of shopping. You are shopping on Amazon and you reach the payment gateway. You might have to do the payment over there on the payment gateway. The gateway is actually a web service interface. Because when you make some payment details over there, when you update some payment details over there in that web page, it re-navigates you to the banking site, or it directly accepts if suppose you put in the credit card number and CVV numbers, all that, it directly accepts the data and gives you the authorization. Whereas when you use internet transfer or internet transaction, it would take you to the banking site. Instead, if you use credit cards or debit cards, it directly accepts the number and starts processing it. It doesn't take you to the banking site, which means you are updating data onto the Amazon site. Amazon is capturing your data, taking it to the banking server, validating it there, getting back to Amazon again and telling that it is valid or it is authorized, etc. So this process of communication between Amazon server and the bank server is termed as a web service protocol. So this web service protocol is basically used through XMLs and JSONs, because these are user-defined languages. User can define how the code should come in, how the code should go out, what is the structure of the body, all that. So like you have a normal Java code which has public static void main, only inside that if it comes I'll allow. All that restrictions would not be there with respect to this web service transfer protocol. So different banking servers will have different web service protocols for them. They might require authentication key, they might require two-step verification, few might require 3D secured PIN. So different servers would require different authentication. Accordingly, the Amazon is going to collect those details and send it across to the banking server. So the server's authentication differs from environment to environment. There are different types of authentications. I'll explain about them while we are working with SOAPUI. So all these are different environments, and this transfer between the two servers, this transaction or communication between the two servers, is termed as a web service. So there is a short intro for the web service. This web service is categorized into various concepts. So we have SOAP, and we have REST, and we have HTTP services. So these are the three major services that are going to be available in web service transfer protocols. So SOAP, when you consider, it is otherwise termed as Simple Object Access Protocol. There is a pure XML standard where you will have something termed as WSDL, Web Service Description Language. Just a minute, there is a message for me. Let me just check that and get back to the stream. Yes, Jinesh. So the session will be uploaded onto the same site where you are actually registered, and we will also send you a copy on the mail. So it will be available on clearcodeconsulting.com/CCCS, that is Clear Code Consulting Camp, CCCS and then CCCSC, and then in that particular navigation you will have it. So I'll just show you that interface. Sorry for the interruption in between, guys. There is a person who could not connect continuously because of power down. So I'll just show where the recorded session can be collected from. It's clearcodeconsulting.com CCCS camp. So on this particular link you will have the recordings even of the previous sessions would be available there. Yeah, I think it's a bit slow. Okay, so there is some network issue. Let me just share the link. Later on you can capture it. The recording would be available from this link. You can take it up anytime you want, and would also be available on YouTube. It is going to be mapped from YouTube to this particular link. So on the YouTube channel as well, it would be continuously updated. You can see all the details from clearcodeconsulting.com, and anytime you can contact me on WhatsApp and probably I'll support you over it. Okay, yeah. So let me get back to the stream. Sorry for the interruption in between. So SOAP is otherwise termed as Simple Object Access Protocol, and there is something termed as a WSDL file, that is Web Service Description Language. This Web Service Description Language is nothing but XML language, XML file, which actually defines how the web service is going to work. When you input two values and you wanted to add them up, what is the result that is going to turn up? So it will have all the standards. What is the type of value that can come in? Integral value or string value or floating point value. So all those would be available as a service description language, that is termed as Web Service Description Language. So initially, to start with, you can go with SOAPUI. SOAPUI has two versions. So this Web Service Description Language I'll explain parallelly step by step. So let's start with SOAPUI now. So Web Service Description Language is something which is defined in a standard protocol on what type of input should come in, what type of output should be there, what is the process that happens, or what is the functionality that happens inside every individual service description. All that would be available there. So I will show you that now. You can just get on to Google, and on Google you can just type in calculator WSDL. So there are different WSDL files available. Calculator WSDL is one of the description language available. So you can just get onto the service description on the first link that you get on Google. You can get into the first link on Google, and then you can get onto the service description. So this is where you will have web service description language codes. So this is what defines how calculator is going to work. Any request you send across will be working based on this description. So this is what you need to take it as a project input while working with your SOAP protocols. So now, in order to work with these, as you don't have a user interface here, that is where to give the values as input, where to get the output, what type of input goes in, what type of output comes out, you cannot do all that programmatically in XML standards, because different XML standards are defined by different organizations. So for that, you have the advantage of SOAP UI, that is, which provides a user interface for the web service. Normally web servers are hidden communications or encrypted communications. So SOAP UI provides a user interface for that encrypted communications. That is why it is termed as SOAP UI. So initially SOAP was the standard that was being used. Initially web service description language files were being available and the web services were being carried out. But later on that got a bit enhanced, and then it was termed as REST, that is representation state transfer. So this representation state transfer and HTTP are almost one and one, where it is actually a communication that happens purely on the URL itself. So REST is something where you send across a request body where you get the response, all that. HTTP, when you take up, almost all communication happens in the URL itself. Let's say, for example, you get onto maps.google.com. On maps.google.com, you type some place, Clear Code Consulting Service LLP. You can get the details available in your URL itself. That is, what is the coordinate of it, where is it located, all that you will get the details in your URL itself if you can see through that. So the coordinates, access, everything would be available there itself in the URL. So this is what is termed as REST and HTTP protocols in a simple understanding format. If you want to understand things easily, this could be taken as an example. There are some complex examples as well, but this is a simple example that you can understand more easily. So this stands for REST. So later on, SOAP was formulated into REST, and nowadays REST is being used a lot. REST and HTTP are being used a lot. HTTP is nothing but hypertext transfer protocol, that is going to be transfer data through links, and REST is something which is in between SOAP and HTTP. So now we'll work in detail about all these three different protocols and how to access them, what all functionalities you can do, all that. So we are going to make use of the tool SOAPUI, that is a easy work environment. SOAPUI is of two versions. So you will have a open source version, that is a freeware tool, and a paid tool or a license tool. So freeware tool allows you to do all automation, and you can do anything to any extent you want if you know the Groovy scripting. Whereas license tool, you need not know Groovy scripting at all. Everything can be done. So I'll show you the differences as well over there. So on license tool, it's available on 30-day trial. If you want to work on the license tool, you can download that. Freeware tool is completely available. You can download it anytime and use it as a freeware. License tool, you can download that whenever you need, and you can run it for 30 days license, and you can explore through the functionalities that you have in the license tool, etc. So I'll show you both the tools now. I have a license tool of version 5 series of SOAPUI, and I have a freeware tool equivalent to version 5 again, but the latest version is 5.4 or 5.5. So I have version 5.0 available with me with respect to both freeware and open source, freeware and license tool. I'll show you the interface on both the tools now. So in order to start with, you can get onto soapui.org. If you want to download, you can get onto soapui.org. On soapui.org, you can get onto the documentation page. So before we actually go for the download, so here you can download the pro version, that is also termed as REST API. So now everything is combined together and termed as REST API. So here you have open source, automation framework for SOAP, REST, and more. So you have open source and professional frameworks available. SOAPUI open source can be downloaded from here, and SOAPUI Pro can be downloaded from here. You have these functionalities available in open source and Pro, which you can see as a difference. So all these are different environments in which we would be working with in today's activity. So we'll work on both open source and Pro, but of a bit older version. When you take up this particular open source, it would be of, so you need to just update your details before you can actually download the open source. It hasn't yet started downloading. So you need to just populate your details over here, and once you have populated, you will get the download started. So this is where you can get the tool downloaded. I have the tool downloaded already for version 5, so I'll go to the tool which I have downloaded and installed. So version 5 of open source, version 5.3 of open source, and version 5 of pro version is available in my machine. So I'll go to version 5 of open source. We'll start with SOAP protocol first. SOAP is simple object access protocol, and we went on to the calculator WSDL now. I'll get back to the same location. So I'll get on to Google. There are different WSDLs available. There are weather forecast WSDLs available. So if you get onto Google and you type in weather WSDL, weather forecast WSDL, different countries available in different states available in every country. All that could be listed under this WSDL file. So this is going to talk about that details. So let me take up first the calculator WSDL so that it will be simple for you to get into stream. So all that you need to do is just copy the URL, get onto your project and say new project, and onto that new project you can just add the URL, and you can just provide the project name and add the URL. So automatically it would take up the project name. Maybe if you want, you can rename it. The project name would be something what you see over here. That would be taken as a project name by default. You can rename it if in case you want. So when you say add, you will get the project added over here with these services. So you will have calculator SOAP and calculator SOAP 1.2 protocol. Both are one and the same, but different standards. So this was an earlier version, and this is the latest version. So you can use the latest version, that is calculator SOAP. Here you will have a request. SOAP request should be available. When you double click that, you will get this particular interface. That is nothing but just the add request alone, what body should be sent across to which URL, so that you get a response. Now this is going to be formulated as a body. So let's take back the example of Amazon validations, or Amazon shopping or shipping of products. So in that case, when you're doing payments in the payment gateway, you put in your credit card number, your CVV number, all that. So it is going to be captured as an input because it is an input box. From that input, it is going to paste the details into the corresponding position. So here it needs value A and value B. I pass value A and value B instead of question marks, and I run the service. I would get the response. At the same time, there is something termed as raw, which talks about the server specifications. 200, there are different server codes available. 200 means it's a successful response. We have got the response successfully. So likewise, there are different server codes available using which you can actually validate whether it is a successful response or not. So this is how basically a SOAP protocol works. We would be passing all the requests in the body. The body would be transferred, and then it would be validated, and the server would get the response in return. So it's going to be a time delaying process because we need to send across a body. The body needs to communicate with the server, get the details formulated, and work out. So that's going to be a bit time consuming process. Instead, we have a REST, which actually talks with the URI itself, that is with the HTTP itself or with the URL itself. So that is going to be a bit faster because it's completely embedded into the link itself. So that is what is the difference between the two. So now we'll discuss more in detail about the other protocols. But before we actually get on how to achieve automation over here. So far what we have done is a manual activity on a simple object access protocol, SOAP, that is older version of web service. If you take up division, similarly you will have the number request. You can just pass that and you will get the response accordingly. So if you want to validate the response, that is in the XML, if you want to validate this response, you can go with assertion. There is something termed as assertion, which you will get when you add a test case. So you need to simply right click on this, say add to test case. So this request will be added as a part of the test case. You will get a test case constructed, a test suite, a test case, and a test step would be constructed. That test step will have the add request. and it will have something termed as assertions. So here you can say add assertions and you can validate your output. This is what is termed as a web service testing. So when I feed in this as an input and execute it, I need to get this as an output. So I need a 17 in the output. Then you can say add assertion. You can say what type of assertion you want to add. So you can say contains assertion, which should check if there is a content of 17 in the execution. It is valid. If I pass a different value, let's say 9,9, and I execute it, contain 17 is not available. That is, token 17 is not found. So these are all different types of validations which you can add. So you have contains validation, you have XPath validation, just like you write XPath in your Java Selenium. Same way you can write XPath for this stuff as well. So this is going to be the XPath structure. You have envelope, body, add response, add result, all that as different components. So you can represent them. So these are all going to be attribute value pairs, just like the same what you have in the HTML code. So you have all that available over here, and that is how we are going to validate the test cases using different steps. So you can add multiple steps one after the other. You can just say add to test case. You can choose the same test case and you can add it there. So now you can choose the entire test step and you can run the whole test step that gets executed step by step. I mean, you can run the whole test case that gets executed step by step and gives you a final execution result, whether the test case is passed or not. It's equivalent to what you do in Selenium. You write step by step the automation codes in Selenium, you execute them, check for the pass or fail status. Similarly, you add all the services step by step. Only thing is, there you will write codes, here you will add services. In SOAPUI, you have complete user interface where you can actually add them up, you can accumulate everything together, and you can do validations. So this can also be parameterized as well, which I'll show you in Pro version more easier. Here, if you want to parameterize, so let's say you wanted to pass data at this point, you will have to just say dollar curly braces. You need to say what is a parameter. So you can just add a new step that says properties. In properties, you can store different values for your parameterization. So I'll pull this properties to the top. First, we'll initiate properties. I'll say A as 20, B as 25. Then I'll go to add request. I'll say dollar test case 1 hash properties hash A. And this is going to be dollar test case 1. So it's test case space 1 hash properties hash B. And you execute the request. You will get A and B populated from the properties and executed step by step. So something went wrong over here. Just a minute. Yeah. So you will get simply the properties hash A, properties hash B, and a dollar, and you will get the parameters updated over here. So this is how you are going to work with parameterization with respect to SOAPUI 2. So this is basic synopsis of how SOAPUI can be parameterized. This parameter can also be iterated using Groovy script. So here you need to write a Groovy script which actually runs on for loop. When you just say insert step, you will have Groovy script, which is exactly equivalent to your JavaScript. Your Groovy scripting is not at all difficult. You can write something in your Eclipse, copy the same, paste it into your Groovy script, you will get the same execution output. The only difference between Groovy and Java is the packages are also same. You will have the same set of import packages, everything as you have in Java. The only difference between Groovy and Java is your Java has data types, your Groovy doesn't have data type. You will say simply def a is equal to 10. Def a is equal to double quote hello. So you will use the command def to define a variable. You will not use anything apart from def. So you will use DEF as a standard data type in your Groovy script. The same Java code can be copy pasted over here, including public static void main. So everything can be copied over here, and just replace the int, char, float, long, double, all that into DEF. When you do that, your Groovy script is ready. And if in case your JavaScript depends on certain libraries, let's say Selenium automation, it depends on Selenium library. If in case you wanted to add those jar files, you need to add them to your SOAPUI library. So you will have an internal library of SOAPUI that is available in the place where you have installed it under E drive. So under program files, so under C drive program files, Smart Beer, SOAPUI, you will have bin extension external. So under this bin external, you can add all your libraries. You will have a default readme file. It tells you what it is all about, why the external folder is available. So there you can see it accepts all the libraries and jar files that you need to add in order to achieve your project execution. So you can add all your files. If you want to work with Excel, you will add PY jar files. If you want to work with different components, you can add the different jar files over here, and then you can execute it, and that is how you will achieve the SOAP automation with Groovy scripting. But when you take a Pro Tool, what is the advantage you have over the open source tool is, I'll do the same project in the Pro Tool. I need not write Groovy script for iteration. I have some methods termed as data source, which will automatically read the Excel and get me the data. In open source tool, I need to write a Groovy script that can read through the Excel and get the data. Whereas in a Pro Tool, I need not write a Groovy script. Rather, I can just add a step that talks about data source. So I'll get on to the test case that is already constructed. I'll just create a step that talks about data source. And into this data source, I can tell what type of data source it is going to be. If it is grid, it is user defined. You can define the data source over here. So you can add individual components and you can define the data source, how it is going to be step by step. So you can say property as A and one more property as B. You can say what are the values of A and B. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Correspondingly, you can populate B. 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110. So this is user defined grid. You can just populate as many columns as you want. And then you can get on to your, so properties are not required in this case. You can delete that. Under your add request, you will have XML level, you will have form level, where you will be actually provided with a proper form level structure of how to get the input. This is not available again in your open source tool. You will have only XML level input that can be passed in. You need to always write the coding, or you need to identify where the question mark is and replace them. Whereas in your Pro Tool, you will have a proper user interface. There are cases, or there are web services where there are 35, 40 fields you need to populate. So in those cases, you cannot keep searching for where the question mark is in your XML. It becomes a tedious process again. In those cases, when you use this form level, you will get the input box generated for every input that can be sent across, equivalent to the question mark what you will have here. So when you get on to any one service, you can see that you will have a question mark over here in the XML. In the place of question mark, you will be populating it with the data that you can pass. So this is the advantage of Pro Tool again. So when you get on to any one service, you can get on to the form level, and there you can just click on this data source. Data source, you can choose where the data should be extracted from. So I'll say get the data from data source property A, and for this get the data from data source property B. And under assertion, I will not add any assertion as of now, so I will just delete that assertion. Let the response assertion alone be there. And then here you can enable and disable steps that you do not want to execute, and you can add a new step, that is data source loop, which will actually loop back to the starting point, that is for loop iteration. Equivalent to for loop iteration, you are just constructing a flowchart. That is the advantage of a pro tool compared to an open source tool. Whereas in an open source tool, you need to write the Groovy script that can achieve all these activities. So let's now execute this particular scenario from the test suite level or from the test case level, wherever you want you can execute it. From the test case level, I'll execute it. So as you can see there, it has just failed at this point where you can actually get on to coverage details, and so you will have the step updated over here. What failed? Data source loop failed. So let me just get on to data source loop. Yeah, I did not provide any step on what should it do. So data source and target step is going to be add request one. So this is for which source you are looping, that is how many times should you run the loop. You will get the data from data source step. And target step, where should it go and connect? So it should go to this and connect again and again with every data that is available in the database. So now let me just execute it again. So as you can see there, it has executed all the steps. So totally 13 steps have been recorded, because one step stands for data source and pairs of steps stands for these two steps again and again repeated. You get the result updated over here. So this is how your iteration is going to work with respect to SOAP. And similarly for REST as well. All that you need to do is just use the proper structure over here and get the data from the proper source, and you can validate it. Next, you can also see that there is a tree level structure available over here from which you can do different types of validations. When I say XPath assertion, over there in your open source tool, you need to write the XPath. But whereas in your pro tool, when you go with XPath assertion, XPath match assertion, you can actually choose this tree and you can say which XPath should it match to. So you can just choose the tree. You can say which XPath should it match to in order to achieve the assertion. This tree would not be available there in your open source tool. You will have to define the XPath step by step. Yeah. Oh, so this is all about your SOAP UI with respect to SOAP protocol. So when you are working with SOAP protocol, you can just simply say add step. You can just add any step that you want. A run test case can again be called in, earlier test case can be called in and executed. But all these are not available in an open source tool. You don't have data source. Data sync is something which can carry the value from here onto an Excel file. Data gen is something which can generate random data for your execution. And then your data source loop, we just saw conditional goto. So you can use conditional goto, that is again available in your open source tool. Run test case is not available. Groovy script is available. Assertion test step is available. So you can just add these steps according to your requirement, and adding a manual step, that is manually what you need to do with respect to steps. So there are certain environment where you need manual intervention. So you can add a manual step there. The code will wait for you to execute and tell the status as pass or fail. So you can just tell test for value and expected result is success. When you are executing the iteration, let me add the manual step as a part of the loop. after add request is processed. So I'll just execute this. When I execute this, after add request is processed, I'll get a manual window like this where it tells what I need to do and what is that I'm looking for. Here I can write the actuals, the URLs that is required, and the result status can be updated as pass or fail. So accordingly, your entire test case will be populated as pass or fail. So I say this as fail, it will stop executing the test there. So this is termed as manual interventions in automation. So once you have designed this particular web service in clear structures, you can actually achieve the automation in open source tool itself. Only thing is you need to know Groovy scripting. Groovy scripting is almost equivalent to Java, just minor changes here and there could occur. So you'll have to have knowledge of that. In order to acquire knowledge of all these, you can get on to soapui.org, documentation, and on documentation you will have details of everything available, but everything would be related to a Pro Tool because they are promoting Pro Tool, that is their business point. So every detailed documentation would be available connecting the Pro Tool. Certain functionalities that you see in the documentation might not be available in open source tool. So for example, when you get onto the properties itself, let's say you get onto properties of a test case or test suite, you have just two tabs available over here in your open source tool, whereas when you get onto your Pro Tool test case, you have all these tabs available and these many tabs available in the same version 5. So I have not moved up the version as well, both are of same version 5.0.0. you have this difference. So this is where the difference is between your open source tool and the paid tool of SOAPUI. But all these can be achieved if you are good in Groovy scripting using a open source tool itself. So this is all about SOAP protocols, where you will have a description language, web service description language, and using that service description language, we define how the service is going to work, and we try to use the service, get the response, and execute it. As far as SOAP is used as a manual environment, so in corporates today, SOAP is used both in manual testing and in automation. When it is being used in manual testing, the project services are going to be called in like this by adding the project. Once the project is added, all the servers are available here. So people will execute this manually as per the instruction provided in the Excel. Look for the status, look for the expectation, and update the status into the Excel back again and send across the Excel to the project owners. But when it is going to be automated, you need to create a test case, you need to create test steps, and you need to execute it step by step like this. So you will have detailed description with video contents available over here in SOAPUI. With examples what I have explained so far, even calculator example might be a part of this. So under tutorials, when you have SOAP and WSDL, you will have these structures available where you can actually pass the values and you can get the response. So it's going to be currency converters that converts the currency value from one currency to the other currency. That is an example provided over here in your soapui.org documentation. So this provides you more details about web services. Next, we will be talking about the REST service. So with respect to SOAP service, you just have a request that can be passed across and you will get a response, and this is all your SOAP service generally does. Whereas when you consider a REST service, so I have a detailed documentation of what everything is all about. So when you consider a REST service has these methods. So these are all termed as methods: get, put, post, delete, patch, update. All these are different methods available with respect to a REST service. So we'll work with REST service now. In order to work with REST services, you can actually take up the environment of working with Google Maps. As I showed you, Google Maps actually deals with REST services where the data is going to be stored in the URL itself. So we term it as a URI, unique resource identifier. So in URI, all the data is going to be stored. So you can just create a new service, new REST project, and there you can just populate the URI that you need to execute. So your documentation on soapui.org provides a URI that can be tested against Google Map. So you can copy that URI, that is a HTTP URI, which has details same like what I showed you on the Google Maps, and you can just paste it there and say okay. Your REST project would be constructed there. So this is going to be your REST project. REST project basically has terminologies like endpoint, resource, parameters. Endpoint is the server to which your request is being sent across. Resource is the environment or the subcomponents or the sub-server locations. Parameters are changing values that would give different solutions. So this is going to be a REST service. You send across a REST service, you will get the response like this. The details of how the elements are going to be stored in Google Maps. So you will get the coordinates of that. Latitude and longitude coordinates will be available, and then you will get the postal code of that particular location. Everything would be available in detail. Google building 41 premise, so what type of building it is, and then what is going to be the different address components available, or what type does this particular result corresponds to. You can store all these into a REST service product. So REST service is a representation state transfer that has different methods. Get method. Get method is something which deals with endpoint, resource, and parameters. So you will send just a URI. You will just send the URL. You will ping the URL. You will get all the results accordingly. That is going to be get method. When you see post method, you are actually posting some details to your URL. So let's take it in a more practical way and in a more authenticated way. So in corporates, anyone cannot ping the URI. So here when you consider Google Maps, it's open source. Anyone can ping it. But if it is not going to be Google Map, let's say Google Calendar, it's a personal environment. If you want to interact with the Google Calendar, and when it comes to Google Calendar, you update something in your mobile or you get some details in your Google Mail, and that is going to be loaded back to your calendar, or you use some other calendar apps in your mobile or some birthday reminder apps in your mobile that gets updates from the Google Calendar. You have something termed as synchronized to Google Calendar, synchronized to Google Contacts, etc. with different applications again. So when you get onto any web page, it asks you to log in with Gmail ID or log in with Facebook. So those are all termed as APIs. When you update your details, they are going to carry the detail to the server, validate it there, get the detail back in response. So these are termed as API environments, application programming interface environments, or REST services. So everywhere you wanted to work with REST service, you need a developer account. If you want to work with REST service, test the REST service, you need a developer account. So in order to work with Google Calendar, in order to create a calendar, in order to identify your calendar list, all that, you can actually get onto console.developer.google.com. This is an environment where you can get a authorization link for working with Google APIs. So onto this console.developer.google.com. Maybe I'll just open a new incognito window. I'll show you from scratch how to initiate it. So I'll get on to console.developer.google.com. You can log in into that console.developer.google.com. And over here, let's say we want to work with Google Calendar API. Then you can search for that API. Or you can simply click on enable APIs and services and you can search for the calendar API. So you can just search for calendar API. You will get Google Calendar API. You can get into that and then you can just continue with enable. So once you have got into Google Calendar API, you can say enable. It will ask you to create a project you can just create a project for that. And you can just specify your organization so that you can associate it to an organization ID if in case you want, and then you can say create. So project would be created now. Now you can get back and you can actually validate the enable the Google Calendar API under that project. So you have clear code camp updated over here. So enter this clear code camp. API service dashboard enable API. Google Calendar API enable. So now under clear code camp, when I am enabling the Google Calendar API, it gets generated. The API gets enabled. It takes some time for all the servers to be generated. So this we are actually doing because we are going to interact with the Google server. We are not going to work on the browser. We are going to send a JSON code to the Google server, for which the Google server is going to send you back the details about your calendar, in which case you need authorization rights. So you need to first enable the API. So Google server understands, okay, this person has enabled the API. So when this user is asking for a request, I can send the response. So this is first level of authorization. Then the next authorization is you can get on to your API calls. That is, you can get on to calendar API. So here into the library, you can just search for calendar API. And now rather than working on enable or disable, you can just use try this API. It will give you sample codes on how to try these APIs. So these are all different services available in Google Calendar API. If in case you want list of calendars available in your user account, then you can just search for calendar list. Calendar list.list is something which you need to work with. That is available over here. Calendar list. So you can work with calendar list.list. So it's still searching for the same. Let me just manually choose it, otherwise I'll say calendar list. I've got calendar.calendarlist.list. So this is something what I'm going to send across. So when you simply say authorize and execute over here, it will ask you for what type of authorizations you want. Select auth to scopes. So which all scopes you want to authorize, and then it will just give you a user interface where you actually need to log in order to authorize that. So you can just log in into your account for one time. So this is a one-time activity. You will get the URI to which you can actually send the request. So you need to add your API key to this URI if you need to send a request. So you can copy this and create a REST request. So you can just create a new REST project where you actually pass this request, and you should update it with your API key over here, which can be extracted from your credentials. So you need to get back into your APIs. You will have something termed as credentials. Inside that, you need to create a credential, that is API key. So this API key, when you pass, it understands that you are actually the authorized person in order to get the request. you try to run the service, it will tell you login required, because from SOAPUI level we haven't authorized the service yet. So authorization is required. For this you have different types of authorizations. When you get on to authorization, you can add new authorization and you can select different types of authorizations. NTML is a server level authorization. OAuth 2.0 is used in Google authorizations. So you can say OAuth 2.0 authorization. You can create a profile, authorization profile. You need to paste the access token over here. The access token can again be interacted with Google and received. So you can say create credential. OAuth client ID can be created. So you can just choose a basic dummy project. For which you are going to use this OAuth client ID. You can save that and you will get a credential populated. For what purpose you are working with this, you can just populate that. You can just choose others and you can just create a client ID. Now over here, if you download this, you will have different components available under your client secret. You will have client ID, you will have project ID, client secret, various components would be available over here. So these all should be passed into your OAuth authorization in order to get the authorization code. So authorization code grant, client identification. Client identification is going to be client ID, which you can copy from here and paste it. So now I'm just running a bit fast in the video. Once the session is done, maybe you can just replicate the video step by step and you can achieve this activities. Client secret. So you can just get on to the client secret. So we have got the client secret over here. You can just copy that. One of the client secret can be copied and pasted. Then you have authorization URI, access token URI, redirect URI. So we have redirect URI available over here. You can copy that. Localhost is not required, so you can copy one of the redirect URI. Into your get token, you can paste that redirect URI. Authorization URI. You have it at the beginning. So this is extracted in the JSON format from your Google Console developer application itself. We have authorization URI available over here. You can copy the authorization URI. That is to which server should the JSON should be sent across so that authorization can be granted. Access token URI. Once the request is sent across, where should the token be extracted from? So these are all different servers of Google where validations take place. So you need to populate all of these. And finally the scope. Do you want it with read only or read and write? So scope you will get it from dashboard under your service. So when you get onto your service, calendar, try this API. Calendar list dot list. So since I've already authorized it, it has executed straight away. The scope is going to be so we don't have the scope details available here. So get back. console.developer.google.com. So on Google Calendar API, when you just get on to the guides and references, you will have details of scopes and stuffs available over there. So these are all different requests that you can make under different environment. And when you choose any one of them, so we are now dealing with calendar list. So under calendar list, when you choose, it will just give you where to send the request, and it will give you details of what is the scope and steps. So read only scope or read and write scope. You can provide the scope, that is what is termed as a scope. So I'll provide read and write scope so that it has all access, and then I'll say get access token. So for one time it will ask you for login. So once you have allowed the access, it would have got the access token. Now you send the same request, it will give you a list of events available in your calendar. What type of pop-up is available, or what is the duration that I want the event to pop up. That is, notification pop-up should happen in my mobile device or in your computer device. It will have details of all that, and what is the method of notification you want, and when do you want the notification to happen. Is it going to be email or SMS, etc.? And if suppose it is email, to which email should it be sent across? All those are going to be available under these particular services. So once the request is received, normally you get onto any application, any of your application in your mobile device. When you say synchronize, it will do all these at the back end. Whatever you have done so far, it is going to do all these at the back end, get the access to your calendar, and your Google server will send this back in response. From this response, so you synchronize your calendar, it will ask you for username, password, because it is performing all these what we did so far. We have been doing this for multiple steps, but everything is pre-designed and coded in automation into your applications now. So when you synchronize your application, your data are going to be carried onto the Google server, it is going to be validated there, then this is going to be given in response. From this again, every data is going to be interpreted, captured, and then used inside your application backend. So in your new application, these data would be used. So this is how APIs are being designed and developed. This is where API would be usable. And as a tester, we need to test on these APIs. We need to check if this is equivalent to this expected. So you need to put this under assertion. You need to add it as a test case, just like what you did in SOAP. So test case management is the same as what you did in SOAP. You can add it as a test case. You can do parameterizations. You can do everything you want. So you can parameterize the key if you want, or you can parameterize the URL, or you can parameterize different user accounts. All that can be parameterized, and then you can pass this as a request using parameterization. So this value can be parameterized as well from properties or from different environment, and you can get the response accordingly. You can add assertions to this. So this is all about testing environment with respect to REST. So REST is something which deals with these many steps. So when you want to perform the same REST call in your Java, all that we did in UI level, that is, we interacted with the API key, we generated various configurations such as URIs, service URIs, request URIs, token URIs, all that. We updated them over here. So all that need to be populated, and a request has to be sent across to the Google server, for which you actually have readily available documentations or Git projects which can be straight away imported and executed. So when you just get onto Google and type in Google auth to Java, you will get it from developer.google.com itself, where you can actually navigate back onto GitHub and you can actually get the code straight away. So you will get the Java equivalent code which can actually generate all of these and get you the details. So on GitHub, you will have the projects available. For different URIs, you will have different examples provided. So if you choose calendar on Android sample, you will have different programs available. You can just get into that and you will have different activities like add, edit calendar activities, asynchronous batches, and then you will have calendar asynchronous tasks, calendar info. So all these can be updated and this project can be imported straight away into your Eclipse and executed. So with respect to API, every provider has details of how to use that. So API usage is not a great difficulty as far as you know what is happening in the API. So to understand what is happening in the API, you can use the SOAPUI interface and you can use the SOAPUI documentation. So any doubts so far with respect to what is covered? So I've just provided a headset for API or what is all about API, because talking in detail about API would be a 2-day session altogether. What we have covered so far with a parallel practice from your end, everything put together would be a 2-day session. I just wanted to provide the knowledge of what all are available as API environment or what all features are available in SOAPUI or what is the difference between SOAPUI Pro and open source. All that I just wanted to provide a knowledge of. If anyone is interested more in exploring about API, you can go through the documentation on SOAPUI anytime you want. You can ping me on WhatsApp. I'll be there to support you on. So if I go more in depth now, it would be more confusing or it would be more tedious or it will be a one-way communication rather than understanding from your end. It would be just a visual knowledge that you gain. So I do not want that to happen. You can actually work on the API anytime you have any doubts while you are executing this. Once you have downloaded SOAPUI, you have any issues in executing that, I can always get onto your machine, fix it, and I can support you on that environment. And anytime you're interested to do a complete execution, a complete functionality on API, you can go through the documentation of SOAPUI step by step. You need not take up any sessions basically. You can go through the documentation and there are good YouTube videos available. You can go through them and I'm always there at the back end to help you out on this. So this is all about a basics of web service that I want to provide knowledge of. The same when you are doing it on Java, you have something termed as rest assured. Rest assured is something which will take care of all this. So rest assured is a library that you can use in order to work with communication with the APIs. And under rest assured, when you just check through, you have this command, when.get. You can just put the URI straight away over here. So when you just put the URI over here, you will get the response out of it. You can extract the response, that will be a JSON response. You can use JSON parsers in Java and you can interact with them. So the code is as simple as this, just like the same what you have been doing so far in your SOAPUI. So this is about the rest assured library. This also has detailed documentation of how it is being used and what are the different components or different steps that are being executed. So you can go through these documentations as well. So this is all I just wanted to present as a part of today's session. So we'll keep continuing with further sessions with different other concepts according to your interest. So any doubts or any more queries or any points that you need details in API with respect to what is covered so far, you can get that clarified. Okay, yeah. So there is a question from Suresh. Yes, Suresh. So the thing is, uh, when can we use JSON files as such in SOAPUI or as such in Java executions? So normally the JSON, what I actually interpreted step by step, can also be converted into a single file and used straight away. So when you get onto a REST project and you create a new REST service URI, so I'll just show you an example with respect to this REST project what I have. So over here, this particular REST project, if it is going to be a post method rather than a get method, if you have a post method over here, it will ask you for a body. So in this body, you can pass the entire JSON. Say for example, you wanted to include an event to the calendar. You want to include some Google events to the calendar. You need details of the event name, when it is starting, when it is ending. All those details should be passed. So that can be sent across as a JSON body. And the details of that can again be acquired from Google APIs. So over here, under your calendar API, so you can get onto your Google Calendar API. And let's say you want to work with post activity. Insert. Under calendar list, you want to do an insert activity. Then that needs these details. So default reminder details, what type of reminder it is all about, and then it requires this body. So here you can update the details of different components. Say for example, you wanted to provide a description for the calendar, you can provide the description. So this is going to be the JSON body. You can copy this JSON body, paste it there in your request, and you can send across the request to the corresponding URI. This is not the URI for post. For post, the URI would be different. So you are provided with the URI over here where the post activity can be done. So to this, the post activity can be performed, for which you need calendar ID as an input. Calendar ID can be extracted out of your get what you did now. From this get, you will get the calendar ID updated. So you have color ID available there. Similarly, for every calendar that you will have a calendar ID as well. So you have the ID over here. This can be used as a calendar ID, and it can be updated onto that particular calendar. So if you paste the ID and if you change the URI endpoints properly and you make it as a post method, you can pass the JSON body, or you can pass a complete file location as well over here. Using property file, you can read the file and copy it over here, and you can send it across. So any more doubts? Okay, yep. Thank you guys. So thanks for connecting the session. Any doubts you have, you can reach on to my WhatsApp number that is available on clearcodeconsulting.com. So on clearcodeconsulting.com, you will have a couple of numbers. You can reach out to either of the number. It's me and Mr. Balaji available there. So at the bottom, you will have the numbers on which you can contact us. Both of these numbers are available on WhatsApp, and these are the email IDs to which you can send your queries across. The upcoming sessions would be intimated in the same channel as per what you have received for this particular training. Okay, thanks for connecting the session.